Recording.
All right, we're recording. Under somewhat unusual circumstances, I'm going to call to order the meeting for the City of Highland Park Zoning Board of Appeals for Thursday, December 21st, 2023. And I will be assuming the role right now of acting chairperson. We're going to do a couple bookkeeping things first, and then we'll get to some of the other business. But first order of business is, can we get a roll call, Patrick?
Yes. Member Krashansky? Here. Member Beck?
Here.
Member Yablon?
Here.
Member Zaransky? Member Hendrick? Vice Chair Bay?
Here.
And then Chair Collister.
Okay. Well, why don't we go through at least and approve the minutes first? Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
I'll make a motion to second.
It's a motion by member Yablon to approve the minutes from the December 7th meeting, seconded by member Krashansky. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will declare the minutes to be approved. Okay. At this point, I think it's probably appropriate to re-say for the record, what I said before, that we are a little concerned about the whereabouts of our chairperson. He was expected to be here tonight. We were trying to get through to him, but we've been unable to reach him thus far. Accordingly, we can probably give, as I mentioned before, since there's only 4 of us here, and the zoning board is usually comprised of up to 7 members, 4 is the minimum number for a quorum, the minimum number to go forward with a meeting, and also the minimum number to pass anything. So anybody who is seeking a variance, we would have to all be unanimous in wanting to grant the variance. So having said that, I guess we can go through the agenda and see who wants to proceed with this matter this evening, and who would want a continuance. So I will start. Well, first I'll go through the other parts of the agenda. Is there anything here, anybody here with business from the public that does not appear on our agenda? Seeing none, we will proceed to old business. The first matter of old business on the agenda is the application for variance 2023-00013. The appellant is Xander Jacobs. Is there somebody here at this point who would like to say anything about that before we have staff make a presentation?
Mr. Acting Chair, my name is Cal Bernstein. I'm the attorney for the applicant. We're going to go forward tonight.
Go for it. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead to and just put you on hold for a second, Cal, to give the other people on the agenda an opportunity that I just gave to you. The other items are new business. The first one being VAR 2023-00011, appellant Sam Kang. Is Mr. Kang or his representative present here?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, would you like to step up to the microphone if I could ask you? I'm not going to swear you in right now because you're not going to proceed with anything. I'm just going to ask you a very simple question. If you want to proceed with your case this evening.
Yes, we would like to proceed.
Okay, thank you. And then the last item on the agenda is variation application number 2023-00012, appellant Sharon Burek. Is somebody here on behalf of Sharon Burek?
Yes,
Mr. Bernstein.
Actually, I get the double bill tonight. Yes, we'd like to go forward with this. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate it. Okay, so going back to the old business, as I stated, it was actually tree variance 2023-00284, also labeled variance 2023-00013, appellant Xander Jacobs. Address of the property is 1145 Lincoln Avenue South. Patrick, do you have a presentation for us?
Yes. Okay, perfect. So we are going to talk about the application for 1145 Lincoln Ave South. the applicant is Kipnis Architecture on the behalf of Chuck Cohen, the owner. This is a heritage tree removal permit case and as well as a rear yard encroachment. This case was continued from the November 14th, 2023 meeting.
Says the 16th.
What did I say? November 16th. Apologize.
No problem.
And so I'm just going to run through a little bit of the background and review what the new proposal is. So this property is located in the R4 LFOZ zoning district, and it meets the 20,000 square foot minimum lot requirement. The existing home was built in 1926, according to the Lake County Assessor's Office. And now the requested relief is to remove one heritage tree, which is different from the two that was November 16th, a 33-inch red oak, number 62, in the pad set to construct a new single-family home. And this is a new addition as well to encroach into the required rear yard setback of 35 feet by 10 feet. So the following proposal is a Chapter 94 as well as a Chapter 150. Here is another shot of 1145 Lincoln Ave South, located in the R4, near to the lake. And just a aerial. I denoted 62 and 43 was the previous tree that was in the approval order. They have now pushed their proposal back and are suggesting they are saving tree 43. So just some property photos again. This is tree 43, which is in front of the house. And this is tree 62, which is behind the garage, more in the middle of the lot. This is the Plata survey. The blue outline is the existing home, and the stars are the denoted heritage trees on the property. This was the original proposal that was forwarded on November 16th. The blue outline is the existing home, and then the gray was the proposal during that case. Now, in the new proposal, they're simply just shifting the entire structure back 10 feet, which will now encroach in the rear yard. It'll encroach in the rear yard, shaded here, for a total of 160 square feet in order to save tree 43. Now this is a side-by-side of the basement footprint. You'll notice that tree 43, in order to save it, they're also cutting out the basement to try and save some of the critical root structure, and they're doing the same with the neighbor's heritage tree over here. But as denoted in the forestry memo, there are two structural pillars here that are within the critical root structure and will cause damage to said heritage tree. We do have Joe Moda here, Assistant City Forester, to answer any tree-related questions if you have any. And now this is a cross-section of those two sections and how they'll function. This is tree 43, and you'll see the structural pillar that will be within the critical root structure. And this is the neighbor's tree. You'll notice this is the existing house's foundation, and this will be the new house. I'll also note that this is true in this location here, but they are adding a sizable portion of their house to the property as well. And then within the approval orders, there's two approval orders with this case. It's the Chapter 94 and the Chapter 150. The variation, the Chapter 150, is contingent on the heritage tree's approval, and the heritage tree also has a stipulation that the single-family homes building permits need to be approved before the heritage tree can be removed from the property. Forestry included a memo. They are not in support of this project. Again, we have Joe Moda here to answer any questions from forestry, and we also have one interested party here from the public. It's a file appearance form through the applicant, so you have most likely usually here. So again, the requested relief is to remove a heritage tree, number 62 on the plan sets, and to encroach into the required rear yard setback of 35 feet by 10 feet. And again, these are a Chapter 94 and Chapter 150. Yes. So, do you have any questions, or would you like to hear from the applicant or city forestry?
Anybody have any questions for staff at this point? Seeing none, we will ask if someone is here to represent the applicant. And if so, please approach the podium. What a surprise. It's Mr. Bernstein.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, wait,
Chair?
okay, 1 second, Kel.
I just want to state for the record that I did watch the video from the earlier meeting so that I am up to date with what happened then in terms of this discussion moving forward.
All right, Kel,
Thank you.
I see a gentleman saying, I think it's Mr. Kipnis.
Yes.
You're both going to be testifying?
Yeah, we've already been sworn in.
Oh, you're okay. So I'll remind that you're sworn in from the last
Yes.
session, so you're still sworn in.
Yes, thank you. So I just call you Mr. Chairman, or do I have to call you Mr. Acting Chairman? Whatever you decide.
Mr. Chairman is fine.
Okay, Chairman, okay. Good evening, nice to see everyone tonight. We are back. As has been outlined by Patrick, we are here because we listened to the discussion at the last zoning board meeting, where we heard clearly that the issue that was concerning to this board was not tree number 62, which is on the north side of the property, which obviously you can see right there, that where the canopy dominates the allowable building envelope, but there was a lot of concern about tree number 43. So what we did after listening to the discussion, and we appreciate the comments that were made, the design team went back and they said, what can we do to try to address the comments that we heard from the zoning board? How can we preserve tree number 43 and still allow the client, the applicant, to build his dream house as proposed? So I'm going to turn it over. Tonight we have the applicants are here. We have the architect, Mr. Kipnis has already been noted. Our arborist is also here, who can discuss in detail how the preservation efforts will work with regard to tree number 43. And then after that presentation, I'll come back and I'll address both the standards in Chapter 94 of the code, those are specifically towards the heritage tree. And I'll also address the standards that are set forth in section 150. Dot 1205 of the code, which is the normal standards that usually apply when when people come before you seeking zoning variances. I want to remind the board that there's a lot of trees on this property. There's a lot of key trees. There's a lot of important trees. We're really focusing on those two heritage trees. The heritage tree to the south with the neighbor's property, I believe it's consensus that these efforts will preserve that tree. There's also an important tree to the north along the property line will also be preserved by this plan. But we're really, again, focusing on those two trees. And then I'll come back and talk about the standards. So I'll turn it over to Nate, and he'll describe what he came up with after listening to the comments of the zoning board.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bernstein at this time? Or before he walks away from the podium? No? Okay, no, I was asking whether anyone had any questions for you, but apparently not, so we're good.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you for having us back. So we did listen, as Cal mentioned, and we were thinking, what is the most minimum thing that we can do to work with this? And pushing the building back, I mean, when it says, we're going in 10 feet into the rear yard setback, it sounds like we're putting a giant thing back there. This is just a very small 160 square foot single story section of the house into the rear yard. Very, very small, the shaded area on the right side. And by doing that, we are able to move the building back away from 43. And in particular, if you go to that section again, if you can go to, well, in all of these, just before you go to that, we've superimposed the existing building on there. When we were out on the site with Joe, the forester from Highland Park, he had mentioned trying to get that back to that point, like that would make sense to do. So if you see the blue outline there, we've carved the basement back to that point. There's a note to the right of the tree on the right diagram. You can't read it, but it says that this is a schematic structural plan. We have not gone through it with the structural engineer, and we are going to look at where those piers, if we even need them, where they'll be. We're happy to work on site with the forester to make sure we're picking the right location, or if we don't need it. But the idea is that in the previous one, we had, I don't remember the exact amount, but something like 75% of the tree root intact. This has 95% of the tree root intact with the overdig figured in. So we feel like we're barely impacting the outer area of the roots. The piers, I understand the concern, and we know that that's just conceptual at this point, and we will absolutely work with everyone to make sure we're not hitting anything we shouldn't be hitting. So I think that's the key points of that. Oh, I guess one other thing I would say, if you look at the main site plan, as Cal mentioned, this site has a lot, the three main trees really are casting a huge area over this site. And the existing building was put in there way before these trees got big. If you were even to rebuild that building, it probably wouldn't be possible. And the way to put a building in there that would fit wouldn't make any sense. It'd be like a hot dog going front to back. No one does that. Everyone has a front exposure to the street. And if we did do that, you'd end up with the pie house in Deerfield, the 15-foot wedge house, and I'm sure that would be a hit with the neighborhood. What we're trying to do is get a normal massed house there. The massing of the house should be normal with the neighborhood. So I think that's the main point. Bruce, can you come up?
Hang on one second. Questions for Mr. Kipnis at this point? Okay, I actually have a couple. I know you've cut back, you said you cut back on the size of the basement to allow for more space for the tree. Was there something above the basement that you're also
So we're
downsized?
cantilevering the structure over that. So that's the idea. And so in the section you can see, yes, thank you. So that section will be structurally cantilevered over that, be placed on top of it. So we're not going to be touching the root system there.
So the only square footage that you're losing from what your original proposal to what you're planning to build is
Basement.
the basement.
Correct.
And what if you were to try and build this without, because you are asking for a heritage tree removal, not you, but on behalf of your client, as well as a variation to encroach into the backyard, what would you, if you didn't encroach into the backyard setback, what would you have to give up in order to downsize to not have that encroachment?
It's the 160 square foot section of the house. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking why would that not be, could you still build a house, just have it be a little bit smaller without having to also have an encroachment in addition to getting the heritage tree removed?
That is part of the plan. We've spent a lot of time working on this plan, and that is an integral part of it. I would rather not lose it. And it was suggested to us, I believe at the last meeting that, or maybe it was off the record, I don't remember, but someone had mentioned if it goes back to help save the tree, that's a good compromise. And this is such a small part of the house that again, 1 story, 160 square feet, probably one of the smaller variances you've had before you, but I think that's what it would take to make that tree work.
What part of the house is going to be in the encroachment? Is that going to be a family room or?
That's off the primary bedroom. Attached to the primary bedroom.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. So, just so I understand this, the city of Highland Park is saying that these structural piers could impact number 43. That's your understanding?
So when we were out at the site, not necessarily that tree, but when we were looking at other trees, you can walk on the ground and trip over a root, a huge root. And so clearly we don't want to hit any of those. So, I would defer to our arborist and to Joe about where to locate those, I don't want to do anything that would be like, oh, look, there it is, and just put it in there. Obviously, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I think you said that the piers are conceptual at this point.
There's, without getting into the structure exactly, there's lines of the structure, and we're just not sure where we're going to do that. We could cantilever across with a beam. There's a lot of options we have. This is just conceptual, and it's almost like this is a worst-case scenario. We're not going to come back with more piers than that. If anything, it would be that number or less, and the location, we're likely going to be able to vary that pretty easily. I'm not the structural engineer on it, so we're going to lean on them. It may be even possible to clear span the whole thing. I'm not sure right now, because we haven't developed the plans far enough.
Just to supplement that, it's very common in zoning cases where it's very expensive to do final engineering, to hire a structural engineer to come out and to actually design it. So generally what happens is that you go get your entitlements. You go say you can build it, then you turn it over to the structural engineer who then fills in the details, because that's the real expense of what involved in this. And they're the ones who charge to try to make it work. So in concept, the architect is saying tonight that he believes it will work, and he's flexible on where those actual piers will go. But that will be impacted by two different variables. Variable number one is what is best to preserve the tree, and variable number two, what the structural engineer comes back with, whether one or two or none of them are needed, because that won't be figured out until they spend the money on that.
And I would add that, when we talk to a structural engineer, we can give them, like, here's the concept. The concept is keep these things away from this diameter here, limit the number. We're going to have to field verify, where we can locate, if any. Again, I keep saying, because we did this without the structural engineer's input. There isn't a structural engineer yet.
So if the piers are strictly necessary in order to possibly be required to cantilever the section of the house that would be cantilevered and provide support for that section, additional support.
there are lots of ways to do this. So, like I said, I think this is a worst case thing. I didn't want to come in and say, look, there's no structure here, and then have the situation come up where we have to come back and go, oops, we need to put a lot in here.
No, I get that, but the concept right now is that you're going to cantilever, and that may require those structural piers.
There's likely, it makes it easier if we can get a point load somewhere in there to break the span up.
And if you didn't have those structural piers there, and you could do this without the piers, then that would have less of an effect on 343?
I would say that's a definite possibility, and it would be, again, if we tell the structural engineer this is our primary goal, then they would work around that.
That concept would be subject to the permitting process, correct?
I'm sorry, say again?
Approval of using this conceptual construct would be subject to the permitting process.
Yeah.
So if the structural engineer presented that to the city and it didn't get permitted, then if we approve the variance, it goes away because it's subject to getting building permits.
Right. It's an interesting situation because they're not asking for a permit to remove 343, but we have our arborist saying that if they go ahead with their plan, that may require the necessity of ultimately removing or harm 343 to the point where it has to be removed. So it's kind of...
you can go back to the drawing. You can't see that little box, but it says clearly this is conceptual at this point because we knew, it's just us taking a semi-educated guess. We really don't know yet. But if you look at the other tree, there's a single pier there. And again, that's the one where we saw the big roots, and we would obviously position that way away from that. And you can see the span that we're anticipating there. It may be that we can clear span this.
We're going to have a brief pause because I missed a call from Kevin.
Oh, okay.
Would like to, can we have like a 2-minute adjournment? Huh? Yeah, can I entertain a motion to adjourn for?
I move that we adjourn so that he can take a phone call from the chairman.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? No.
No.
Okay. We're going to be adjourned for just a very brief period of time. Thank you for your patience again.
Start again.
Okay, we're going to be back in session. Everybody ready to go?
I'm just going to do a roll call because this is new territory for me, but just to be
Better
safe.
safe than sorry. Let's get
Yeah.
another roll call for the restarting of our meeting tonight.
Yes. So Member Trushansky?
Here.
Member Beck?
Here.
Member Yablon?
Here.
Member Zaransky? Member Hendrick? Vice Chair Bay?
Here.
And then Chair Call. Great. Thank you.
We've got 4 people here. We will now proceed.
And I have a question
Okay.
for,
Member Yemlin.
Question for you.
since there is no structural engineer here, is there a chance that the structural engineer could be like, what were you thinking? Like, we're going to need 10 piers, or we're?
No,
Or, like, how educated are these guesses?
this is a pretty good guess. So it's either we're going to clear span that or it's 1 or 2 piers. These were just kind of following the lines of what we have the floor plan set at. It may be that we don't need the 2 of them. It may be 1, it may be 0. Again, if you look at that span that we're guessing on the right side, it's pretty long. We might just be able to clear. So I just don't know. And like I said, I just would rather show what would work and maybe we can do much better.
To follow up along those lines, I assume even though you don't know if a structural pier is going to be required now, I assume you know if you were to cut it back further, there'd be some amount where you know you would not require a structural pier. Is
So
that correct?
the cantilevering's running left-right.
Okay.
So if we cut it back into the basement, it doesn't matter. That's not impacting the span.
So there's no way you can reconfigure this where you know with certainty that you could clear span it. That's going to have to be the determination
I
of
mean,
the
it's
structural engineer.
30 feet across there. So, that's a piece of steel. And I mean, it's possible. I mean, bridges span that far and then some. So it's not like this is out of the realm to clear span it. It's just, there's a balancing act between, because this is aging in place, we're not going up a whole bunch of stairs, keeping this sort of low. We have a structure, we want to be above the ground. There's just some math to figure out with that. But I imagine we could do it clear span, but I can't say that with certainty tonight.
So if there's any way that you could do a clear span, working with a structural engineer, that's the way you'll proceed.
So,
Regardless of whether it requires steel or the size of the beam or whatever.
yeah, just the reason to even show the piers is because it's going to break the span, it's going to break the depth of the structure, and therefore it's going to cost less. So I'm not sure exactly, but this is, whatever that cutout is, that's tens of thousands of dollars. And it's not 10,000, it's more than that.
Just for clarifying for when we go in the future, so if this were to be approved, they wouldn't be beholden to not have pillars. They would be able to have pillars here because it is approved that they can do so. But if they come back and with the permitting process, just have it like cantilevered without the pillars, that would just require director's approval. Without less harm, it would most likely receive approval, but if it's up to the director's discretion on whether or not that would have to come back to the ZBA to be approved. If another pillar needed to be added per se as well, it would have to come back to the ZBA to be approved because it would be deviating from the plans that are in the approval order.
Or theoretically, with the agreement of the parties, we could prove it with only going forward if it was to be clear span within our authority to do that as well.
It is. That is not in the approval order right now, so it would have to be continued to the next to just adopt, but that is something that can be added as well.
Any other questions? Other gentleman who wants to speak? Sir, if you could state your name.
He was sworn in last
He was sworn in last time. I'm sorry. Failing memory.
I was
so
here last time.
You're still under oath then.
All right.
Please proceed. You still state your name for the record.
Okay, Bruce Horrigan, Horrigan Tree Care. One of my questions to start with is the question that you're having about the pier. What is your concern about those piers? Can I ask that?
Sure, I'll try and field it. I think the objection, as I understand it, by our forester is based on the existence of the piers may have an adverse effect on tree number 43.
Okay.
If you didn't have the piers, tree 43 would have a better chance. But I'm not trying to put words in the forester's mouth. That's my understanding.
I'm just asking because I can answer to that. I want to have a question that
Okay, we want to have the forester look at the podium and Patrick, you'll have to advise me. Does he, I don't think.
No, since he's staff, he doesn't need to be sworn in.
So yeah, the digging of a pier could cause damage to the tree depending on what roots you hit, how you do the digging. So it would certainly be a matter of the process that they follow. Then on top of that, it would area also. It's not just the digging of the hole, it's the staging of material, the moving through that area that also compacts the roots and can lead to a degraded health condition.
So if they were to do this out the pier, the clear span is what? Still be concerned about there being a tree?
It would depend on their tree protection plan, but that's more of a permitting issue. I would expect Bruce to put together a plan that, detailed how they expect to mitigate construction, compaction, and like where the.
Would you still be opposed to it if there were no pier?
I would not. No.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Forrester?
carpet until they're done.
They're doing construction
You
here.
have the black square or red black area here. You can't step off until you're done.
You can, but there's a price to.
Okay. To answer the question about the piers in the root zone, there's always a concern anytime you drive over, you're taking any equipment, any of that root. Now, if you look at how that root zone, see these little lines here where they drew where the roots are meant to be? Nobody knows where those roots are. One day we're going to be able to image it. We're going to be able to, put a chemical into the tree and then light up those roots and be able to say, oh, there's a root right there. There's a root right there. Okay, we can move it around. When we go in to do those piers, as Nate's saying, is hopefully they don't need any pier. But if they do need one or two, there's going to be on that plane where that beam is, it doesn't have to be right here. So if they start digging down, hand digging down, they hit a root, you move over 6 inches. They're only going down, it's going to be about a 12-inch in diameter pier, correct, Nate? About approximately a 12-inch in diameter pier. You sink that down, it's only going down to the frost level, which is 3.5 to 4 feet in Chicago. So you're not going to have this huge overdig. You're just going to drill, dig the hole down, and then you fill it up with the pier. All right. So with that, it can be if I or any other Joe or whatever, any arborist is on site during that time when they're digging, you go, oh, we're hitting a root, move over. We're hitting a root, move over. You will find, because it's like the old wagon wheel with the hub and the spokes, those roots go out. You can easily drop between those roots. And you're only hitting small hair roots. You're not hitting the big arterial roots. So putting a pier in shouldn't be that big of a problem. Now with Joe's, the forester, I won't be too friendly with Joe on that, but the forester's thing about having equipment on there. Crane mats are one of the best things you can do over top of a critical tree's roots. They're wooden mats that are, they're designed for cranes to go in environmentally sensitive areas. They do it. ComEd does millions of them every year. Whenever you see them working on the side of the road, you'll see these crane mats. And if we can get those and lay them down over the critical root zone, this tree will have a very, very limited exposure to problems. Doesn't mean, you can't build near a tree and not have some issues, but we can minimize them. My company is Oregon Tree Care. My goal is to keep trees alive. My job is to keep trees alive. So once we get into this, my job is to keep that tree going and get as many ways as possible to keep that tree alive. And there are many things that we can do. And we do the things that are necessary, we don't just throw a whole bunch of stuff at it. We just do what we think is necessary to keep that tree alive.
I'm not sure if this is a question for you or the architect or both of you, but when you talk about you would be proceeding, and if you were to sink a pier and run into some roots, you could say, okay, we'll move over 5 inches to protect the root. I assume you're going to be working with a pretty detailed structural engineering plan. Is that plan going to give you enough leeway to move a pier 5 inches without having to redo the engineering?
It would be a phone call to the structure for sure, but we would also, while we're designing it, tell them exactly this problem. We might need to move this, and you make this have a safety factor that it will really, that we've got a 1 foot variation or a 1.5 foot or whatever it is.
For a little leeway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we want to design it like, nope, it's here or nothing. That would, everything we know about what we're trying to do here, we need a little bit of variability in it.
Structural engineers routinely will give you leeway for a few inches as long as it.
If you tell
falls
them,
within
if you
their
don't tell them,
calculations.
no. But yeah, if you tell them that that's the goal, yeah, they will.
Well, my guess is they'd make the beam a little bit bigger so
Maybe,
that it could, so that you could move 1.5 feet on either side.
Anybody else have any questions for either Mr. Horgan or the architect?
And I should also just point out, if we're talking about a beam going across, those 2 piers shown here are basically in line. So if we're doing that, we could, the more I'm looking at that, the more likely it is we only would need 1. And again, if we even need that. So I think looking at the 2 of them is probably not correct.
So would you be willing to proceed if we were only to give you permission to do 1 pier?
Yep. Yes.
So, changes that you heard tonight were not cheap. What's being proposed, they're losing square footage in the basement. They're dramatically increasing the cost of the construction by trying to mitigate the influence of the construction on tree number 43. So a lot of thought has gone into this, and also a lot of money is going to go in there to protect and preserve and allow tree number 43 to thrive. At this point, I know that there was unfortunately, member Hendrick's not here because I know that he really enjoys the standards, but I think at this point, I'd like to address the standards. I know we talked about them last time, and it's up to the chair. I can go through more. I could just really highlight the 1 or 2 standards that really hung up the board the last time.
Talking about the heritage tree standards
Yes,
to start.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, under chapter 94, section 94 of the code. I'm just going to cut to the chase with regard to the, which is 1D, that there's no practicable.
Cal, excuse me.
Yeah.
But before you start
Yes.
with this, I'd like to ask our forester one
Sure.
more question,
Sure.
please.
He's part of our case in chief anyway, so that's.
Okay. How do you feel about 1 pier on 343?
If it's hand dug and you're making sure that you're not hitting any large roots, I feel fine about it. I think that's okay. But if you were to use equipment to dig it, then definitely not. It would have to be something that's hand dug, and I would like their arborist on site to review what's going on and what they're seeing as they're digging.
And
Well, the obvious follow-up to that is that the plan is to go forward with hand digging for the pairs?
Yes. That was, I believe Nate already testified that was the intent. And before we even step up tonight, we talked in the back room, is that the arborist, or as Bruce mentioned, or the city forester, either or both can be on site when that's done to verify that that's done properly.
just as a follow-up too, do you concur with the use of crane mats as saving trees, or?
Yeah, anything that would spread out the amount of force that's going on in the area. So crane mats, we often use a layer of wood chips about a foot deep. You could use them both in conjunction. There are several ways that you can reduce the effects of compaction on the roots. But that would be one that would
So for absolute clarity's sake, if they were to agree to hand dig only one pier and use crane mat for moving any equipment on and off, you would withdraw your objection as the arborist.
For yes, tree number 43.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, Cal.
Couldn't have done that better. So just, I know we'll be kind of dragging on a little bit. The one standard that was discussed a lot last time was, and this is regarding chapter 94, is on one of the mandatory findings, which is 1D, there are no practicable, I had trouble with that word if you've watched the video. Practical alternatives to the proposed removal of the heritage tree, given the nature of the property and any proposed improvements to the property. And so first of all, I went to look at the dictionary and what's the proper definition of practicable.
I've looked it up too.
Okay, and it means feasible or capable of being done. So I'm going to use the word feasible. It's easier for me to say. So the question is what is feasible and what was the intent of that provision? So I actually did some research and discovered the legislative intent behind that one section. And what the intent behind that and what the council was trying to do, I don't know if they did it, if it's still up to interpretation, but what they were trying to do is not cause an applicant to do gymnastics, to, as Nate said, to create a house that like a hot dog or the pie-shaped house, to try to do contortions to get it within, so it doesn't encroach into a heritage tree root zone. The idea is whether for zoning, whether there was another alternative, another feasible alternative. And what they were really thinking about is if you have a by right plan, which this was a by right plan, that we were asking for no setback relief, but for the fact that there's these heritage trees. What the council was thinking at the time when they drafted this was that if there's another alternative, there's another idea where this improvement can be built, but still preserve the tree. And what they were thinking was maybe a zoning relief, under chapter 150 of the zoning code. If you, instead of moving and try to encroach into a setback or something, in order to move the house so that it would preserve the tree. So that's really what happened here, is because in order to preserve 43, and we just heard there's a chance, under certain circumstances, a good chance that tree would be preserved and it could thrive, that's requiring us to seek other relief. And that's where the council thought this would be going. So that's why we're here tonight. We are here to try to activate the building envelope, not prejudice the applicant in saying you can't use, if you try to build where the existing footprint of the house is, you're losing 22% of your building envelope. We calculated that today. So what we're trying to do is try to allow this applicant to use his allowable building envelope, but at the same time preserving tree number 43. And what that's causing us to do is come to seek a variance under section 150.125 of the zoning code. And we already submitted a written submission with regard to addressing those standards, and usually it's hardship is the issue, and reasonable return. Obviously, reasonable return on this is that you don't want to lose a good portion of a significant portion of your building envelope. But the hardship is all this gymnastics is being done to save tree number 43.
Before we delve into those standards, if we can go back to 1D of the heritage tree standards, if you did the research to know what the intent of the council was, and were to certainly take at your word that what you're saying is accurate. Do you also know why they chose to use the word practicable as opposed to practical?
No, I don't think, actually, this didn't come from my research, but is that the word practicable is used often in statutes. And that's maybe the reason why they did it. I don't have an answer for that question. But the important part of that paragraph is the fact that it's the proposed improvement. And that's what it's really geared towards, what you're seeing tonight is what the proposed improvement. It's not, the purpose is not for the zoning board to do a design review and change the shape of the house or do anything like that. It's really what's a feasible alternative based on the design that you're seeing tonight?
Well, that's part of the definition of practicable. The other part is, as you said, is or capable of being done.
Yes.
So are you taking the position there's nothing else that's capable of being done with this property if we don't let you remove the heritage tree?
And do this development, this improvement. Because it's not just capable, but it's also to improve the house as proposed. That's the other section, the other part of that sentence. So it's not just, you could build a very thin house. You could do something like that. There's things you can do that are feasible, you're capable of, but that's not what this section asks you to do. They ask you to take that in conjunction with the proposed improvement. And the proposed improvement is a by right improvement because they're asking for no relief except for the existence of the heritage trees. And so getting to the other section, section 150, that the hardship and everything is being driven by the fact that we're jumping through hoops to preserve that heritage tree. So I know there's a neighbor here who's objecting tonight. We'll reserve, if the board decides they want me to go, I'm really prepared to go through every one of the standards, but we have other cases on the agenda tonight, and it's all in our submission, in our written submission. So I'm prepared to go through it, but in the interest of time, we'll sit down right now and let you hear from the applicant and answer any
I would
questions.
ask you one question
Sure.
about the hardship. As you may recall, I asked the architect, Mr. Kipnis, what part of the house would be lost if you stayed within your building by right area and didn't ask for the additional variance for the encroachment on the setback restriction. So why is that and he said it was something about an area adjacent to one of the bedrooms. Why would that be a hardship and build the house a little bit smaller?
Because that is not what the code is contemplating. If you look at the hardship code section, and it says the plight of the petitioner is due to unique circumstances, and the proposed variation will not merely serve as convenience to the petitioner, but will alleviate some demonstrable and unusual hardship which is not generally applicable to other properties within the same zoning district. What we have here right now is we have a heritage tree. We have actually 3 heritage trees that are dominating the building envelope of this property. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to alleviate the demonstrable and unusual situation, the hardship. And asking the applicant to build a smaller house, I think, is unfair because but for the heritage tree, this house can be built as a matter of right. And so they would not be seeking any relief. So the whole concept behind the code is that, to allow you to save heritage trees, we're willing to give you something else. And
how large is the house how many square feet is the house that they're proposing to build?
I know they're not maxing out the FAR. What is it, Matt? It's on the drawings. I don't have it. Maybe I have it in my file. That's why I bring the architect around to answer those questions. Just give me a second. And can you tell us what the FAR is? What's the allowable? It's a large lot.
$96 out to be $61.90.
You're proposing a 61, almost 6,200 square foot house. And how much would it have to be cut back if we didn't give you the encroachment?
About 160 square foot.
160 square feet. It's not a material difference.
So it'd be a little more than 6,000 square foot house still.
Yes, but it's not a material difference, 160 square feet. And the fact of the
But is
matter
it a hardship to only be able to build a 6,200 square foot house and not a 6,000 square foot house?
No, we're not asking for FAR relief. We're asking for setback relief that is being driven by the fact that we're spending tens of thousands of dollars to preserve a heritage tree. And so there is a give and take on that because that is what this applicant is looking to do. We heard you. You said the important thing was to try to save cherry number 43. This applicant is spending tens of thousands of dollars. That's the testimony you heard tonight. Is spending tens of thousands of dollars to preserve and maintain. And you heard the city forester come out and confirm that all these efforts can be successful and allow for that to do it. And so what we're asking for is what the council contemplated when they created that heritage tree ordinance, is that if you're able to preserve that heritage tree, if you're able to limit the amount of loss of heritage trees, that will give you something in return. And we're asking for is the rear yard relief.
Okay, there's no question. I'm not trying to to bigger with you, but obviously the fact that you are now asking for an encroachment, as you know, calls into play a whole different set of standards that we have to apply.
Yes.
Whether we want to or not, we have to apply.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, but for the existence of that heritage tree, we would not be asking for a variance.
Anybody else have any questions?
I do. In terms of the extra little piece that you need the variance for, isn't there any way to add that square footage somewhere else along the line, somewhere within the giant buildable area that you're not using?
Nate's going to.
You know, when we do zoning appearances, usually it's never great to talk about the floor plan. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, I need this extra room because, you know, we have an auditorium because the kids like to perform. And like, that's not real. So like, I don't know what, you know, talking about the specifics of the floor plan would, you know, I don't want to go there. But if, you know, where would we put that? So we're kind of limited on this site. Because this is a ranch, this is an aging in place. Yes, there is a little section in the front that's 2 stories so that it relates to the street better, and it's the 2 bedrooms that are guest rooms, but they're going to be living, aging in place, first floor, which is why it looks so big. It's actually just 1 story. And if we compacted this, if we took that piece and started moving it in, we had showed at the last meeting, you saw those examples where it's much more bulky. We're trying to, because it's a large single floor plan, to have a lot of window area and a lot of view corridor. And if we start picking that up and putting it in the middle, it's going to be like, wow, there's that little thing. We look at it every day. I really don't want to do that.
And I would just emphasize that the hardship runs with the land. It's not in the use. And so you could pick apart, otherwise there'd never be a variance for a swimming pool or never a variance for a tennis court, because what's the hardship for that? In this situation, the hardship runs with the land, and the hardship is the heritage tree. And that's what's causing the house to be pushed back 10 feet. That is driving the request.
Anything further from the petitioner?
Thank you. Thanks for hearing.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard on this matter? I think there are 2 people. Sir, as I recall, you were present at the last meeting as well? You were present at the last meeting as well this morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're still under oath. If you just remind us and state your name for the record.
My comments really are not particularly
Sir,
around the.
You first state your name for the record, please.
I'm Robert Kuhl, Kuhel. I live at 1159 Lincoln Avenue South for the past 40 years.
Okay. Please proceed.
My interests are more on the construction and the driveway and things of that nature, as opposed to the heritage trees. My report's going to take some period of time, because I'm going to give you the glass that is half empty, not the one you heard that was half full. Okay, you're going to get 2 sides of the story, and my side's going to be on the building itself and the issues with the codes that I found that there's conflict and interpretation differences. So if you're willing to sit here another hour or 2, I'm more than happy. You've got copies of it. I got a whole slew of reports here, as well as an analysis that we did from the Moraine Township offices. You have a schedule there of all 27 properties in the community. We looked at the square footages of all the houses, the properties of all the surrounding properties. And this property here that we're talking about, it's 2 stories. It's in this plan, 2-story house. It's 6,100 something square feet. It's a story, and there's another story. There's another 1,000 feet on the second story on this proposed house. So, want me to start? I'll start from the beginning.
Well, I would actually prefer, if possible, if you could limit your comments, if you have some, that relate specifically to the relief that's being requested. It's not before us to talk about the driveway or any other construction issues that may be within the purview of the building department or the engineering department, what have you. But if we're talking about, they have asked for a request to remove one heritage tree, and they've asked for a request to encroach a certain amount of distance into a required backyard setback restriction. So those are really the only matters that we can, I'd love to give you an opportunity to be heard, and we do appreciate the obvious amount of effort you've gone through to put together this environmental impact assessment. I just don't know that this is the right forum to go through all that right now. We're really here, the sole decision for us to make are whether to give a permit to remove a heritage tree and to give a variance for to encroach into a setback restriction. So if you have something to say.
That is very educating, because I understood that it was more than the trees.
Could I just interrupt 1 second?
Yeah.
His packet is available here for anyone who would like, just so it is available to the public. You can come up, take it if you'd like.
Thanks, Patrick.
I don't know where to begin, except at the beginning, because I talk about many other things besides the trees. So maybe I'm at the wrong meeting.
I'm trying, and I'm honestly trying to do the best I can to explain what the only thing we can decide has to do with the heritage tree and has to do with the variance for building into a setback restriction. We really can't go into the other. I mean, we can, but it is kind of meaningless in this forum. So it may be something you want to address with the building department or with the engineering department in Highland Park, but for purposes of what's before us, we'd appreciate if you confine your remarks again to either the removal of the one tree or building into the backyard setback.
Well, the trees, of course, are all based upon the size of the house. If the house was smaller, you'd have less problem with the trees. So in my analysis here, with the help of the Moraine Township office, I have a schedule in the packet that you have. This property, proposed square footage is 6,196 feet. The average size of the 27 properties around is only 3,831 feet. This house is going to be 38% size-wise larger. The architect was very clever. He was able to maximize every inch of space to fit the codes. Very clever. I congratulate him. It's very smart. But the space still basically is, it's an additional, more than the average, 2,300 square feet more than the average square feet of these other 27 houses in the surrounding area.
But that's not part of the relief that they're requesting, and I'd like to stay within, what we are here to decide tonight. And I, with the greatest amount of respect, I understand that you have something that you want to say, but again, I don't know that this is the proper place to say it, unless it has to do with what we're being called on to decide tonight.
See, it's sort of between a rock and a hard place. How can you can talk about a house that it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. The house is